The uprooted kingdom, what we miss about true power. What if everything you've been taught about success, influence, and even spiritual power is completely upside down? What if the greatest gift isn't power, prestige, or a perfect life, but something far more profound, something that radically changes everything? Picture this: a church deeply blessed, full of spiritual gifts. They're eloquent, they're wise, they're even performing miracles, but they're fractured, ripped apart by pride, ego, and conflict. Sound familiar? This was the church in Corinth. They had it all, except for the one thing that truly mattered: love. Imagine being there. The air thick with tension. Paul's letter is read aloud. His words don't just speak. They slice. They expose every fault, every hidden motive. But they also illuminate a path to healing. In a culture obsessed with status, with performance, with proving yourself, Paul declares a revolutionary truth. Without love, every accomplishment, every sacrifice, every gift is absolutely meaningless. Fast forward to today. Look around. Our world is shattered by division. Love often feels conditional, a transaction, or it is drowned out by the deafening noise of self-interest. But here, in 1 Corinthians 13, Paul presents a radical, defiant vision of love. A love that is divine, selfless, eternal. A love that can mend the broken, unite the divided, and ignite the weary soul. This isn't just some poetic ideal. This isn't just flowery language for a Sunday sermon. This chapter is a practical, brutal blueprint for living. It forces you to confront your own heart. Over the next few moments, we're going to rip open what love truly is. Not a fleeting emotion you fall in and out of, but a way of life, a divine calling, the very essence of God's kingdom. So, as we dive in, ask yourself, what would change in Fei life if I embraced this kind of love? What could happen in Fei world if we made love the ultimate, non-negotiable priority? Are you ready to find out? Your words are noise. The empty echo of eloquence. Without love, your words are noise, just empty echoes. Does that sting? Does it challenge everything you thought you knew about communication, about influence, about impact? Imagine the sound, a clanging cymbal, loud, jarring, empty. It grabs your attention for a moment, then leaves you with nothing but a ringing in your ears. No lasting impact, no substance. This is where Paul begins his iconic discourse on love, and his imagery would have hit the Corinthians like a thunderclap. He writes, "Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I have become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal." 1 Corinthians 13:1. Think about that. For a church that prided itself on eloquent speech, on spiritual gifts, on supernatural tongues, this was a direct hit. The imagery wasn't random. In Corinth, brass instruments were used in pagan rituals, producing loud, repetitive sounds, noise for noise's sake, lacking depth, lacking meaning. Paul, with surgical precision, compares even the most eloquent, angelic speech to this hollow, ritualistic clamor. You could speak every language known to man, and then some. You could possess rhetoric so compelling it leaves audiences spellbound. You could have the charisma to move masses. But if love isn't the bedrock of your message, your words are just empty echoes. They might stir the air, but they will never ever stir the soul. Think about today's world, an endless roaring stream of communication. Social media platforms are flooded with passionate posts, fiery debates, grand declarations. Politicians deliver speeches brimming with promises. Influencers captivate millions with carefully crafted words. Public figures ignite movements with their rhetoric. Yet, how often do these words truly, genuinely, deeply change lives? Without love, even the most profound, most powerful statements are reduced to noise, just digital clatter. Consider the modern parallels. We've all heard words that sound good but ring hollow, apologies that lack sincerity, promises made with ulterior motives, declarations of support that crumble under the slightest pressure. Perhaps you've been on the receiving end of words meant to inspire, but they left you feeling empty because they lacked genuine care. Or maybe, in moments of frustration or ambition, you've spoken words that, though powerful, were devoid of love. What impact did those words leave behind? Did they build, or did they just echo now? Imagine the opposite. Words infused with love. Think of the teacher who speaks quiet encouragement into a struggling student's life, or the friend whose words, even in disagreement, are filled with compassion and understanding. Recall the parent whose affirmations have carried you through life's darkest valleys, or the stranger whose simple, "I see you," transformed your entire day. Words powered by love don't just communicate, they heal, they inspire, they transform, they leave a legacy. Paul is saying something revolutionary here. He is calling us to examine not just what we say, but why we say it. Are our words driven by a desire to glorify ourselves, to win an argument, to gain likes, or are they driven by a genuine overflowing love for others? Jesus himself embodied this principle. His words were failways, rooted in love, even when they were challenging. When he spoke to the woman at the well, his love transcended every cultural barrier. When he addressed the Pharisees, even his sharp rebukes were aimed at drawing them closer to the truth, at bringing them to repentance. His love infused every single syllable, giving his words eternal weight. They weren't just noise, they were life. This verse also challenges us to rethink how we approach disagreements, debates, and even casual conversations. In a world where polarization often reigns, imagine how different our interactions would be if love guided our words. It doesn't mean we avoid hard truths or silence our convictions, not at all, but it does mean we communicate with a heart that seeks to uplift rather than tear down, to build rather than to demolish, to understand rather than simply to be understood. On a personal level, this verse asks us to reflect deeply. Have there been moments when your words sounded like clanging cymbals, loud but meaningless? Have you prioritized winning arguments over winning hearts? Have you spoken to impress rather than to truly connect? The good news is, it is never too late to change. Love isn't just a feeling you wait for, it's a choice. An intentional decision to value others above yourself. When we choose love, our words gain power, not because of their eloquence, but because of the heart behind them. Paul's message in this verse is both a caution and an urgent invitation. It is a caution against the emptiness of words spoken without love, and it is an invitation to let love radically transform how you communicate. When love is the unshakable foundation of your words, they don't just make noise, they create harmony. They don't just stir fleeting emotions, they change lives. They echo with eternal significance. So, the next time you speak whether it is a simple hello, a passionate argument, or a heartfelt speech, pause. Take a breath and ask yourself, am I speaking with love? Because when love is present, even the simplest words carry the weight of eternity. And that, my friend, is the kind of communication that leaves a legacy. The kind that resonates far beyond the moment it is spoken. The kind that actually changes the world. You are nothing. The futility of gifts and sacrifice. Without love you can change the world. You can move mountains with your faith. You can give everything you own to the poor. You can even sacrifice your very life and still be nothing. That's a hard truth, isn't it? Imagine a world where achievements define your worth. A world that celebrates the accumulation of power, knowledge, and accolades above all else. Does this sound familiar? It's a world much like ours, filled with influencers striving for recognition, leaders commanding attention, and individuals exhausting themselves to leave their mark. Now picture Paul's words cutting through this noise like a double-edged sword, directly challenging this deeply ingrained mindset. He writes, "And though I have the gift of prophecy, and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains but have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing." 1 Corinthians 13:2-3. The weight of Paul's argument is staggering here. He isn't just making a point. He's dismantling the illusion that extraordinary abilities, profound understanding, or even heroic self-sacrifice can ever replace love. He points to gifts and actions that, on the surface, seem undeniably noble, even divine. Prophecy that reveals divine truths, faith that literally moves mountains, sacrifices that inspire awe and reverence. Yet Paul boldly declares that without love, these are futile, hollow, devoid of eternal value. Consider prophecy, the ability to speak forth divine revelation. In Paul's time, prophets held immense influence. Their words carried the authority of God himself. Today, we might liken this to the power of influential voices, dynamic preachers, brilliant thought leaders, passionate activists, whose words shape public opinion and inspire change. But what happens when the motivation behind those powerful words isn't love? The speeches may stir emotions, the teachings may illuminate truth, but if love is absent, they fail to transform hearts. They become noise that fades into the background of history. They leave no lasting imprint on the soul. Knowledge, too, is held in the highest esteem. The relentless pursuit of understanding fuels innovation, progress, and discovery. In modern terms, knowledge is power. But Paul reminds us that even the deepest understanding of mysteries, whether scientific, philosophical, or spiritual, amounts to nothing without love. Knowledge without love becomes arrogance. It becomes a tool to elevate oneself rather than uplift others. It becomes a force that divides rather than unites. It breeds contempt, not connection. And then there's faith. Faith so profound that it moves mountains. Imagine a person so spiritually confident, so utterly convinced, that their prayers literally change landscapes. Such faith seems invincible. Yet Paul warns us that even this kind of faith is meaningless if it isn't grounded in love. Faith without love becomes a demonstration of personal power, a performance, rather than a reflection of God's heart. It's about ability, not his character. Then Paul turns to acts of sacrifice, perhaps the most outwardly noble of all human behaviors. Picture someone giving away every single possession to feed the hungry, or willingly offering their life for a cause, becoming a martyr. Surely such acts are the pinnacle of virtue. Yet Paul declares, "If I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing." The imagery is stark, a martyr consumed by flames, yet their ultimate sacrifice is rendered meaningless without love. Why? Because sacrifice devoid of love becomes a transaction rather than a gift. It can be driven by pride, a desire for recognition, or even guilt. But it lacks the selfless heart that gives it true, eternal significance. In contrast, love transforms sacrifice into a reflection of God's character, an offering that mirrors the ultimate sacrifice of Jesus Christ. That is the difference between self-glorification and God-glorification. Paul's words resonate powerfully in today's culture, where achievement and influence are often pursued at the expense of genuine love. Consider the workplace, where accomplishments are celebrated, but relationships are neglected. Think about social media, where people curate perfect images of generosity or spirituality, often seeking likes and validation rather than authentic connection. Even within ministries, the temptation to prioritize growth, visibility, or accolades can tragically overshadow the foundational call to love. We chase metrics instead of hearts. This passage challenges us to examine our deepest motives. Are we pursuing success to glorify God and serve others? Or are we driven by the relentless need to prove ourselves, to be seen, to be applauded? Are our sacrifices truly selfless, or are they veiled attempts to gain recognition, to assuage guilt, to build our own kingdom? When love becomes the non-negotiable foundation of our gifts and actions, everything shifts, everything changes. Prophecy becomes more than revelation. It becomes a lifeline connecting people directly to God's heart. Knowledge becomes more than facts. It becomes wisdom that nurtures, heals, and builds community. Faith becomes more than a demonstration of power. It becomes a testimony that humbly draws others into a transforming relationship with God. And sacrifice, when infused with love, becomes a profound act of worship that truly reflects the sacrificial love of Christ. Consider the life of Mother Teresa, whose very existence exemplified love in action. She didn't seek fame or recognition. She poured herself out for the forgotten, the marginalized, the dying. Her sacrifices, fueled by a ferocious divine love, inspired millions and left a lasting legacy that still echoes today. Contrast that with acts of charity done solely for publicity. Both may feed the hungry, but only one truly transforms lives. Only one points people to the source of all love. Paul's words invite us to reflect deeply on our own lives. Have you ever accomplished something remarkable, only to feel a profound emptiness afterward? Have you ever given of yourself, but felt frustrated or unfulfilled because love wasn't at the center? Conversely, can you recall a time when an act of love, however small, brought profound, unexpected joy and meaning? Love gives eternal significance to everything we do. Without it, even our greatest achievements are fleeting. But with love, even the smallest act, offering a kind word, sharing a simple meal, truly listening to someone in pain, becomes sacred. It reverberates with eternal meaning. Paul's message is crystal clear. Love isn't optional. It's essential. It is the fuel that gives life to our gifts. It is the golden thread that weaves our actions into God's eternal story. Without it, we are nothing. With it, we reflect the very heart of God Himself. In a world obsessed with accomplishments and accolades, let us remember that the only true measure of greatness is love. Let every word you speak, every action you take, and every sacrifice you make flow from a heart transformed by the boundless sacrificial love of Christ. Are you ready to build on that foundation? The radical portrait of love. Is this your love? 1 Corinthians 13-4, -7. Love isn't a feeling. It is a fight, a war against your very nature. Are you ready for that kind of love? Because if you think love is easy, you haven't truly understood Paul's radical blueprint. This isn't just poetry, it is a mirror, and it might just expose some uncomfortable truths. Paul, writing to that fractured, prideful Corinthian church, offers a definition that doesn't just explain love, but demands a response. In 1 Corinthians 13-4, -7, he doesn't simply describe love, he paints a living, breathing portrait of it. He gives us more than words. He gives us a challenge. This is what true, divine love looks like. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. This isn't just a list, it is a mirror. Let's hold it up to our own lives and see how this radical, demanding love can transform not only our lives, but also the broken, hurting world around us. Love is patient. Love is kind. Two virtues that sound simple, yet feel nearly impossible in the chaos of modern life. Picture a traffic jam, horns blaring, tempers flaring, impatience bubbling over, or imagine that frustrating coworker who seems to test your limits every single day. In these moments, patience isn't just hard, it feels unnatural. Yet Paul begins here because patience is foundational to love. Patience says, I will wait, I will bear with you, I will endure even when it costs me something. Kindness, on the other hand, takes patience a step further. It is not just about enduring, it is about responding with active goodness. Think of a mother soothing a crying child at 3 a.m., or a friend offering forgiveness instead of retaliation. In a world often marked by sharp words and quick judgments, kindness becomes revolutionary. It disarms. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. These three are deeply intertwined. Envy looks at what others have and whispers, "Why faithum fay and not fay me fay?" Boasting looks at what fay have and shouts, "Look at fay me fay, aren't I better than you?" Pride is the root, the self-worship at the core. All three are rooted in a heart that's focused inward rather than outward. Think about the corrosive effects of envy in today's world. Social media is a breeding ground for comparison. Scrolling through pictures of someone else's perfect vacation, dream job, or picture-perfect family can stir envy like never before. Yet Paul reminds us that love isn't envious. It celebrates the blessings in others' lives. It genuinely rejoices with those who rejoice. Boasting, on the other hand, thrives on a desperate need for validation. It's the subtle, or not so subtle, ways we try to elevate ourselves, whether through bragging about our achievements or fishing for compliments. But love doesn't need to boast because it isn't trying to prove anything. Love is secure, confident, and focused on lifting others up rather than building itself up. It doesn't need applause. It seeks to serve. Faith does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Pride and dishonor often work hand in hand. Pride puts self at the center, and dishonor devalues others in the process. In Paul's day, the Corinthians were struggling with both, dividing themselves based on spiritual gifts and looking down on those who seemed less spiritual. Sound familiar? In today's polarized world, pride shows up in the way we argue, in our refusal to listen, and in our desperate need to be right at all costs. Dishonor follows closely behind as we belittle, dismiss, or cancel those who disagree with us. Yet, Paul calls us to a love that is humble, a love that doesn't puff itself up but lifts others up. Consider Jesus, who washed the feet of his disciples, even as they argued about who was the greatest. His love wasn't proud, it was servant-hearted. His love didn't dishonor, it honored even the least deserving. Selfishness and anger often feel justified. I deserve this, we tell ourselves. I have a right to be upset. But love flips the script. Love isn't self-seeking. It looks outward. It says, "How can I serve fee?" rather than, "What can I get from fee?" Think about a time when someone inconvenienced you. Maybe they cut you off in traffic, or interrupted your plans, or genuinely wronged you. How did you respond? Love invites us to pause, to let go of anger, and to choose compassion instead. It's not about suppressing feelings, but about channeling them through grace. Perhaps the most radical aspect of this love is its refusal to hold grudges. Keeping a meticulous record of wrongs is easy. It feels like self-protection, but love calls us to forgive, even when it hurts. Think of Jesus on the cross, saying, "Father, forgive them." That's the kind of love that changes everything. In relationships, this might look like letting go of past hurts rather than weaponizing them. It's choosing to move forward rather than replaying old arguments. Imagine the freedom this kind of love could bring to marriages, friendships, and families. Love does not delight in evil but rejoices with the truth. Love isn't blind. It doesn't ignore wrongdoing or sweep sin under the rug, but it also doesn't delight in evil. It mourns over it. It recoils from it. It rejoices with the truth. In a world where deception and half-truths abound, love stands firm in what is right, even when it's inconvenient or unpopular. Think of a true friend who tells you the hard truth because they genuinely care about you, even if it's uncomfortable. That's love in action, truth spoken in grace, not judgment. It seeks righteousness, not compromise with darkness. Faith always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Paul ends this section with a crescendo describing love as relentless. Love protects. It's a shelter in the storm, a shield for the vulnerable. Love trusts, it believes the best, even when doubts arise, extending grace and benefit of the doubt. Love hopes, it refuses to give up on people, on situations, on the promise of redemption. even when things seem impossible. And love perseveres. It doesn't quit. It doesn't throw in the towel, even when things get brutally hard. This kind of love is rare, but when it's lived out, its transformative power is undeniable. Imagine a community where people actively protect each other, truly trust each other, hope for the best in each other, and stick with each other through thick and thin. That's what Paul envisions for the Corinthians, and for us. In a world fractured by division, jealousy, and pride, Paul's definition of love offers a profound blueprint for healing. Imagine what our workplaces, our churches, our families could look like if we practiced even a fraction of this love. Consider the astonishing power of this love to mend broken relationships, to bridge divides, and to create communities that genuinely reflect God's heart. Paul's words in 1 Corinthians 13-4-7 aren't just a lofty ideal, they're a call to radical action. They challenge us to love in ways that are countercultural, costly, and utterly Christ-like. This love isn't easy. It will stretch you. It will challenge your comfort, but it's worth it. It's the kind of love that changes people, heals wounds, and points the world directly to Jesus. The question is, will Fei choose to live it out? Will you let this radical portrait of love be your Fei portrait? Everything fades away, the unfailing anchor of eternal love. 1 Corinthians 13-8, -10 everything you chase, everything you value, every skill you master. It's all going to fade away. Except one thing, are you investing in what truly lasts? In 1 Corinthians 13-8, -10, Paul makes a stunning, almost scandalous declaration. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. This passage pulls back the curtain on eternity, revealing the enduring nature of love compared to the fleeting, temporary nature of spiritual gifts. Paul isn't diminishing the value of these gifts. Not at all. He's placing them in their proper perspective, showing that love is the one thing that transcends time, circumstance, and even the very fabric of this present reality. Paul begins by acknowledging the reality and power of spiritual gifts like prophecy, tongues, and knowledge. These were powerful tools in the early church, given to edify, instruct, and guide believers. Prophecy brought divine messages. Tongues demonstrated God's miraculous power, and knowledge provided deep understanding of God's mysteries. To the Corinthians, who were enamored with these gifts, Paul's assertion that they would one day cease must have been shocking. Imagine living in a world where prophecy reveals the hidden things of God, where tongues provide supernatural, unhindered communication, where divine knowledge fills every gap in understanding for the Corinthians. These gifts were not just tools, they were badges of honor, symbols of their spiritual maturity and direct connection to God. Yet Paul gently but firmly reminds them that these gifts are temporary. They are designed for a specific purpose, for a specific season. Think of spiritual gifts like scaffolding around a building, invaluable during construction, absolutely essential for the work. But once the building is complete, once the structure is finished, the scaffolding is no longer needed. In the same way, Paul explains that these gifts will pass away when the fullness of God's kingdom arrives, when completeness comes. They disappear. They are part of a world still waiting for redemption, a world where we know in part and prophesy in part. In stark contrast to the temporary nature of these magnificent gifts, Paul declares that Fey love never fails Fey. This isn't just a poetic flourish, it's a profound, anchoring truth. While gifts will fade, love endures. Why? Because love is rooted in God's very nature. God is love, John writes. 1 John 4-8. And since God is eternal, so is love. It is his essence. It is who he is. Think about the permanence of love in the grand narrative of Scripture. Love was present in the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth. Love was the motivation for God's covenant with Israel, despite their repeated failures. Love took on flesh in Jesus Christ, who lived, died, and rose again to reconcile humanity to God. And love will be the defining characteristic of God's eternal kingdom, where every tear will be wiped away and all things will be made gloriously new. Paul's message about the enduring nature of love is as relevant today as it was for the Corinthians. Modern society often prioritizes the fleeting over the eternal. We chase after accomplishments, possessions, and experiences that provide temporary satisfaction, but leave us longing for more. Consider the way people pursue success at work, promotions, accolades, financial gain. These can feel like the ultimate goals, but they are temporary. The same can be said for social media validation, where likes, shares, and followers create an illusion of worth that fades as quickly as it arrives. Even relationships can fall victim to a transactional mindset, valued only as long as they serve our immediate needs. Paul's words cut through this cultural noise, reminding us that love is the one thing that truly lasts. When prophecy ends, tongues are silenced, and knowledge fades, love will remain. It's a sobering and liberating truth. The only investments that truly matter are the ones rooted in love. They are the only ones with eternal dividends. Paul's reference to knowing in part and prophesying in part speaks to the fundamental limitations of our current understanding. Even the most profound spiritual experiences are incomplete glimpses of God's full reality. Prophecies reveal pieces of the puzzle, but not the whole picture. Tongues give glimpses of heaven's language, but not its fullness. Knowledge deepens our faith, but it cannot grasp the entirety of God's plan. But there is hope. There is a glorious promise. When completeness comes, what is in part disappears. The word completeness points to the culmination of God's redemptive work, the day when Christ returns and we see him face to face. In that moment, the partial will give way to the perfect. Prophecies will no longer be needed because we will dwell in the full, unhindered revelation of God's glory. Tongues will cease because all will understand the language of heaven. Knowledge will pass away because we will know fully, even as we are fully known. This promise of completeness transforms how we live now. It reminds us to hold loosely to the temporary and cling tightly to the eternal. It shifts our focus from building earthly kingdoms to participating in God's eternal, unfailing kingdom. How does this eternal perspective on love shape your life today? First, it challenges us to prioritize relationships over achievements. In the end, it won't matter how many promotions we earned or how many followers we gained. What will matter is how we loved, the kindness we showed, the forgiveness we extended, the sacrifices we made for others. Second, it calls us to live with profound humility. Recognizing that our understanding is partial keeps us grounded. It reminds us that we don't have all the answers, and that we are utterly dependent on God's wisdom and grace. Finally, it inspires us to live with an unshakable hope. The promise of completeness assures us that the struggles and uncertainties of this life are not the end of the story. There is a day coming when all things will be made new, and love will reign supreme. In 1 Corinthians 13:8-10, Paul offers a perspective that radically redefines our priorities. Spiritual gifts, as valuable as they are temporary tools for a temporary world. Love, however, is eternal. It is the golden thread that connects us to God and to one another, both now and forever. The challenge for us is clear. Will we invest our lives in what is fleeting or in what truly lasts? Will we chase after gifts and accomplishments, or will we pursue the selfless, enduring love that reflects God's very heart? The choice is yours, and the stakes are eternal. Are you making the right investment? Grow up. The call to mature love. 1 Corinthians 13:11. Are you still loving like a child? Demanding, taking, running away when it gets hard. It's time to grow up. It's time to embrace a deeper, more profound kind of love. In 1 Corinthians 13:11, Paul writes, "When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. With this simple, powerful metaphor, Paul invites us to reflect on our journey from immaturity to maturity, not just in life, but specifically in how we understand and live out love. It's a poignant reminder that true, God-honoring love demands growth, demands sacrifice, and demands a willingness to leave behind self-centered, childish ways. When Paul speaks of childish ways, he paints a stark picture of love as seen through the eyes of immaturity. A child's love, while often sincere, is fundamentally self-centered. It seeks immediate gratification. It's quick to dissolve when met with inconvenience, discomfort, or anything that doesn't align perfectly with its desires. Think of a toddler clutching a favorite toy, refusing to share, throwing a tantrum because their tiny world revolves entirely around their desires. Isn't this a brutal reflection of how many of us approach love even as adults? We love when it's easy, when it aligns with our preferences, when it clearly benefits Faye. But when love becomes challenging, when it asks us to forgive, to sacrifice, to endure, to be uncomfortable, it's tempting to retreat, to lash out, much like a child throwing a tantrum when things don't go their way. Paul's metaphor confronts this tendency head on. He challenges us to grow beyond these childish notions of love, which are so deeply tied to self-interest. He calls us to embrace the deeper, selfless, mature love that profoundly reflects God's character. When Paul speaks of becoming a man and putting away childish ways, he's describing a process of profound transformation. Maturity doesn't happen overnight. It's a relentless journey marked by lessons learned, failures overcome, and countless moments of surrender to God's will. True love, Paul suggests, absolutely requires this kind of ongoing growth. Consider how this applies to Faye relationships, in friendships, in romantic partnerships, and even within families. Immature love seeks to forget Faye rather than to forgive Faye. It keeps score. It demands fairness based on its own skewed perspective. It walks away when things get tough. Mature love, on the other hand, is willing to endure discomfort. It chooses to prioritize the needs of others. It remains steadfast and committed, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. Think of Jesus' love for humanity, a love so profound that it led him directly to the cross. It wasn't a love rooted in convenience or self-preservation or getting his own way. It was a love that cost him everything. Paul calls us to grow into faith kind of love, a love that moves past childish reactions and truly reflects the heart of Christ. In today's world, the journey to maturity is often actively resisted. Our culture celebrates instant gratification, quick fixes, and surface-level connections. Social media often encourages performative love, where grand gestures are shared for likes and validation. But the quiet, often unseen, behind the scenes work of love, apologizing, truly forgiving, showing up day after day, consistently enduring, often goes unnoticed, unapplauded. It's the grit of love. Moreover, many of us resist growth because it's uncomfortable. Maturity requires deep introspection and a genuine willingness to confront our flaws, our biases, our deeply ingrained habits. It demands that we take responsibility for our actions and their profound impact on others. It asks us to move past blame and self-pity, stepping instead into a place of accountability and grace. For example, think about conflicts in relationships. An immature approach might involve avoiding the issue entirely, holding grudges indefinitely, or relentlessly insisting on being right at all costs. A mature response, however, seeks genuine resolution. It prioritizes understanding over winning. It values the relationship itself far more than the need to prove a point. This kind of love is hard. It's costly, but it's the only love that builds lasting connections and fosters true healing. The Bible is filled with stories of individuals who profoundly grew in their understanding and practice of love. Peter, for instance, began his journey with Jesus as impulsive and self-assured. He professed undying loyalty, but then fled when the stakes became too high. Yet after encountering the resurrected Christ, Peter matured into a humble shepherd of God's people, leading with profound humility and genuine love. Similarly, Paul himself experienced this radical transformation. Once a zealous Pharisee, he persecuted Christians with fervent brutality. But after his encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus, Paul's life was forever changed. He grew into a man who endured imprisonment, beatings, and unimaginable hardship to spread the message of Christ's love. Paul's words in 1 Corinthians 13 are not theoretical. They are the living testimony of a man who had put childish ways behind him and embraced the costly, glorious path of Christ. Like love, Paul's metaphor invites us to examine our own lives right now. Are we still clinging to childish ways of loving? Are we seeking only what's convenient, holding on to grudges, or avoiding the hard, often painful work of reconciliation? Or are we truly allowing God to mature us, shaping our love to look more and more like His? Think about the relationships in your life. Are there areas where you desperately need to grow in love? Perhaps it's in learning to listen without interrupting. Perhaps it's forgiving without expecting an apology, or giving without expecting anything in return. Growth often starts with small, intentional steps, and each step, no matter how tiny, brings us closer to the kind of profound love Paul describes. Practical steps toward maturity in love. Look for opportunities to serve others without expecting any recognition or reward. Serve in secret. When conflict arises, pause before reacting. Consider how a mature, loving response might look, and then choose it. Humbly acknowledge your mistakes and seek to make things right, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Pray daily for the Holy Spirit to grow the fruits of love in your heart, helping you to love others as Christ first loved you. These steps are not easy. They will demand something from you, but they are profoundly transformative. With each act of selfless love, we actively put away childish ways and grow into the fullness of the love God intends for us. In 1 Corinthians 13:11, Paul reminds us that love is a journey, one that requires us to grow beyond childish notions and embrace the depth and selflessness of mature love. This growth is not just about our relationships, it's about becoming the very people God created us to be, people who genuinely reflect His love to a world desperate for it. As we put away childish ways, we discover a love that is not about what we can fagit fay, but about what we can fagive fay. It's a love that transforms us. It transforms our relationships, and ultimately, it transforms the world around us. So, will you take up the challenge to grow in love? Will you trust that as you do, you will see the fullness of God's love revealed in and through you, seeing through the fog, trusting God in the blur? 1 Corinthians 13:12. Why is God's plan so unclear? Why do we struggle with doubt? Why do prayers sometimes feel unanswered? Because you are looking through a dim, ancient mirror. But one day, the fog will lift, and you will see everything with perfect clarity. In 1 Corinthians 13:12, Paul delivers a profound truth about our current human experience. For now we see through a glass dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know fully, even as I also am fully known. This verse captures the raw, often frustrating, reality of living with limited understanding, particularly when it comes to the vast and incomprehensible nature of God's love and His divine plan. The imagery of seeing through a dim glass vividly portrays how our earthly perspective is incomplete, much like peering through a foggy, imperfect mirror. In ancient times, mirrors were made of polished metal or bronze, offering only a blurred, imperfect reflection. Paul's audience would have immediately understood the comparison. What they saw was a distorted, cloudy imitation of reality, far from true clarity. Just as our current comprehension of God's love and His divine plan is profoundly limited by our human perspective, so our view is obscured. This dim view often manifests in our struggles with faith and understanding. Why do certain prayers seem unanswered? Why do we face trials that appear insurmountable, challenges that make no sense? Why does pain persist? These questions reflect our fundamental inability to see the full, glorious picture. Yet Paul encourages us to trust that clarity will come. Faith is absolutely required when the glass is dim, and trust becomes the unshakable anchor that holds us steady through the fog. In today's world, this message is as relevant as ever. The modern landscape is saturated with distractions, doubts, and competing ideologies that can make God's love feel distant or obscure. Social media algorithms, endless news cycles, the relentless pressures of daily life. These often blur our view, leaving us feeling disconnected from the divine. It's easy to focus on fleeting achievements, on external validation, on what is seen and heard in the immediate moment. Yet Paul reminds us that these are temporary. What truly endures is God's love. A love we may only partially understand now, but will one day experience in its glorious fullness. Paul's words also point us toward an unshakable hope. While the dim mirror represents our present limitations, the promise of seeing God face to face assures us that this partial understanding is not permanent. It is not the end of the story. Imagine the pure joy and profound wonder of that moment, standing in the very presence of the Creator, His love no longer veiled, no longer obscured, but fully, perfectly revealed. All the doubts, all the questions, all the struggles of this life will simply fade away in the blazing light of His glory. This future reality profoundly transforms how we live today, encouraging us to trust, to hope, even when the path is unclear, even when the mirror is utterly clouded. Throughout Scripture, we find countless examples of individuals grappling with the dimness of their understanding. Job, for instance, endured profound suffering and relentlessly questioned God's purposes. Yet his agonizing journey ultimately led to a deeper, more personal revelation of God's character. He declared, "My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you." Job 42:5. Similarly, the disciples often struggled to comprehend Jesus' teachings, especially when he spoke of his death and resurrection. Their limited understanding gave way to glorious clarity after the resurrection, illuminating the stunning fullness of God's redemptive plan. In our personal lives, the dim mirror can feel particularly challenging during times of crisis or crushing uncertainty. Perhaps it's a health diagnosis that defies explanation, or a broken relationship that leaves us questioning God's goodness, or a dream that seems to have died. In these moments, it's tempting to rely solely on our limited perspective, to demand answers, to doubt. But Paul's words remind us to place our unshakable trust in the one who sees the whole picture, the one who holds the blueprint. Each act of faith, no matter how small, draws us closer to the God who knows us completely, intimately, profoundly. Seeing through a glass dimly also speaks to the paramount importance of humility. Recognizing that our understanding is incomplete invites us to approach God with a posture of utter dependence and reverence. It reminds us that we are not the ultimate authority, but rather humble participants in a divine story far, far greater than ourselves. This humility allows us to embrace mystery, to surrender our need for all the answers, trusting that God's plans are good, even when we cannot fully grasp them. To see love more clearly, to pierce through the fog, we must actively engage in practices that align our hearts with God's unchanging truth. Spending consistent time in Scripture offers glimpses of His love, like sunlight breaking through a cloudy day. Prayer invites us to draw near, asking the Holy Spirit to illuminate the dim, murky areas of our faith. Reflecting on God's profound faithfulness in our lives reminds us that His love is constant, unwavering, even when it feels distant. Each of these steps helps us navigate the tension between the now and the not yet, grounding us in the enduring, unshakable reality of God's love. Paul's metaphor of the dim glass is not merely a statement about our limitations, but a powerful invitation to hope. It assures us that the struggles and uncertainties of this life are not the end of the story. One glorious day, we will stand in God's very presence, fully known and fully loved, experiencing the completeness we long for with every fiber of our being. Until that day, let us walk by faith, trusting in the glimpses of God's love we see now, and eagerly, passionately anticipating the day when we will see him clearly, face to face. Are you living with that eternal hope? Are you trusting him through the fog? The greatest investment, why love lasts forever, 1 Corinthians 13:13, and the end, what if everything you've ever been told about success, significance and legacy was wrong? What if only one thing truly matters, and it's not what the world tells you to chase? This is it. This is the culmination. Paul concludes his breathtaking meditation on love in 1 Corinthians 13:13 with these profound, undeniable words, "And now these three remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love." This verse stands as a soaring crescendo, summing up the eternal essence of love and its absolute preeminence over even the most cherished virtues of faith and hope. It challenges us to reflect on the enduring significance of love, not just as a fleeting emotion, but as the unbreakable foundation of a life aligned with God's eternal purpose. Faith, hope, and love are indeed the unshakable pillars of the Christian life. Faith is the anchor that ties us to God, giving us the strength to trust him, even when circumstances make no sense, even when the world feels like it is crumbling. It is the assurance that although the mirror is dim and the path uncertain, God's promises remain irrevocably true. Hope is the forward, looking anticipation that keeps us pressing on, relentlessly confident that what lies ahead in Christ is far greater than anything this broken world can offer. But then there's love, greater even than these mighty pillars. Why? Because love is the only one that will endure forever. It is the only one that transcends time and space. In eternity, faith will be perfectly fulfilled as we behold God face to face. There will be no need for faith when you are in his presence. Hope will be fully realized when every promise is kept, every longing met, and every tear wiped away in his glorious presence. But love will remain. Why? Because love is the very essence of God himself. As John writes, God is love, 1 John 4:8. Love is eternal because it emanates from the eternal nature of God. It existed before creation. It flowed through Jesus' ultimate sacrifice, and it will define the relationships of heaven for all eternity. It is the very air we will breathe, in a world consumed with questions of meaning and purpose. This passage offers a clear, resounding answer. Love matters most, but not just any love. Not the conditional, transactional, self-serving love the world often displays. No, the divine, selfless, enduring love described by Paul, which seeks the good of others without condition or expectation of return. This love is not transactional or shallow. It is sacrificial. It is transformative. It binds families. It heals wounds. It builds bridges where there were once chasms of division. It brings heaven to earth. Imagine a world where love like this reigned supreme. Imagine political systems driven not by raw power, but by radical compassion. Imagine relationships defined not by scorekeeping, but by unconditional forgiveness and extravagant generosity. Picture communities where no one is left behind, where people see one another as God sees them, worthy, cherished, and unconditionally beloved. This is the radical vision Paul holds before us. A life lived in love, reflecting the very heart of God himself. But the world we live in often feels heartbreakingly far from this ideal. Love, as Paul describes it, can seem countercultural, even revolutionary. Modern society tends to measure worth by success, by possessions, by influence. We elevate the self, often at the brutal expense of others. We prioritize achievement over relationships, speed over connection, fame over genuine impact. Against this backdrop, Paul's declaration that the greatest of these is love feels like a radical reordering of faith values. It challenges us to ask, what truly matters? What will remain when all else fades into dust? Consider the legacies of those who have left an indelible mark on history. It is not their wealth, their titles, or their accolades that truly endure, but the love they demonstrated. Think of Mother Teresa, who devoted her entire life to the poor and sick of Calcutta, embodying sacrificial love, or Martin Luther King Jr., whose dream of racial equality was rooted in the unshakable belief that love could overcome even the deepest hate. Their lives remind us that the greatest impact comes not from accumulating, but from giving, not from dominating, but from serving, not from taking, but from loving. This truth extends directly to our personal lives. What will our families, our friends, our communities truly remember about us? Will it be our achievements, our wealth, our reputation? Or will it be the fey we showed them? Will it be the moments we prioritized relationships over ambitions, the times we chose kindness over being right, and the ways we reflected Christ's love in the everyday, mundane moments? This is the legacy that echoes for eternity. Paul's emphasis on love also speaks directly to the church. It reminds us that our mission is not about programs, not about buildings, not about numbers, not about perfect sermons. It is about embodying God's love to a world desperate for hope. When the church operates in true, selfless love, it becomes an undeniable beacon of light, drawing people not to itself, but to Christ. It reminds the world that though we are broken and flawed, we are deeply, passionately loved by the one who made us. Jesus himself exemplified this love. His entire ministry was a living, breathing demonstration of what Paul describes in 1 Corinthians 13. He healed the sick, fed the hungry, and forgave the outcast, all driven by an unrelenting love for humanity. On the cross, Jesus showed the ultimate act of love, laying down his life for a world that had rejected him, betrayed him, and sentenced him to death. His resurrection declared that love conquers even death. And through his Spirit, he empowers us to love as he loves. Living out this love is not easy. It is perhaps the hardest thing you will ever do. It requires us to lay down our pride, to let go of grudges, to extend grace even when it's undeserved. It calls us to love our enemies, to serve those who cannot repay us, and to seek the good of others above our own. It demands sacrifice, but it also brings profound joy because in truly loving others, we reflect the God who first loved us completely. As we meditate on Paul's words, let us remember that love is not just an ideal to admire, it is a command to obey. It is not merely a feeling, but an action, a daily choice we make moment by moment. Love is what transforms hearts. It reconciles relationships. It brings heaven to earth. In the end, when all is said and done, it is love that will endure. It is love that will define our legacy, and it is love that will draw us closer to the God who love. May we choose to live in the light of this truth, allowing love to shape our words, guide our actions, and fill our hearts. For the greatest of these is love. It is the heartbeat of life. It is the foundation upon which faith and hope rest. And it is the one virtue that remains eternal. This love is patient. This love is kind. This love is selfless. This love is enduring, and this love is transformative. It is not simply a concept to admire, but a lifestyle to embody, a call to action that has the power to reshape our lives, our relationships, and our very world. As we reflect on this profound chapter, we see that love is not optional in the Christian walk. It is essential. Without it, our gifts and deeds are hollow. With it, even the smallest act of kindness reverberates with eternal significance. Love is what makes our faith vibrant and our hope secure, pointing us back to the heart of God who first loved us. In a world fractured by division, hatred, and pain, the message of 1 Corinthians 13 is more urgent than ever before. Imagine what could change if we chose to live by this radical standard of love. Lives could reconcile, communities could heal, and even the seemingly insurmountable divides in society could begin to mend. It starts with each of us, committing to love. Not in word alone, but in relentless, sacrificial action, reflecting Christ's perfect love in the way we treat others. Now the challenge is yours. How will you live out this love? How will you allow God's transforming love to permeate every fiber of your being, so that you, in turn, can transform the world around you? Let this chapter not just be a beautiful passage to read, but a powerful living truth to embody. Let love lead the way forever.